Hello, I'm Erica Maxwell with the City of Chandler Human Relations Commission, conversations with Black historic families in Chandler. Today we have Reverend Willie Arbuckle with us. Welcome, Reverend Arbuckle. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
You have so much to share about your history and being here in Chandler. And I'd like you to just start with, when did your family come to Chandler? Tell us about that. And give me a little timeline of your history here in the city of Chandler.
My full name is Willie Eugene Arbuckle Sr. And my folks moved here from Oklahoma in 1937. We lived on farms outside of Chandler, and at some point, I'm not just sure when, my folks moved to Gilbert, and we were living there when my dad passed away. I was 8 years old, and then my mom, for some reason, moved us to a place down south called 11 Mile Corner, and I think they called it that because it was 11 miles from Coolidge, 11 miles from Casa Grande. There's a lot of cotton to be picked there, so she was down there doing farm work. My mother did that along with working for the rich people in the Chandler area. She had a nickname of Dr. Arbuckle or Dr. Buckle, and she got that title because she had a lot of home remedies, and when people got ill and couldn't afford a doctor or doctor's hours were over, she would use home remedies to help get people well. And then in 1940, we moved into the Chandler area. It was not Chandler, but we thought of it as Chandler, but it was actually still in the county, and it was on the street called Saragossa. And we lived there in a rented house. And then when I was about 13 years old, my mom and my oldest brother purchased a house, and the address was 24 East Saragossa Street in Chandler, and I lived there until I got married in 1952.
What brought your parents to Chandler? How did they wind up moving from Oklahoma City here?
Well, my oldest brother had asthma, and my parents were told that the dry climate in Arizona might be better for him, so we basically moved here because of his asthma. But my parents their intention was to move back to Oklahoma, but that never happened. Again, that was in 1937.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about your schooling. So you moved here when you were very young. Unfortunately, you lost your father. So tell us about your schooling here in Chandler.
Well, there was no schools in Chandler for African American children. Of course, way back then, we were not African Americans. We were colored children. Mm-hmm. That was a nice term, colored children. So since they had no schools for Chandler, it was completely segregated, Chandler School District, this is my understanding, paid for our transportation from Chandler to Mesa School District. That was an old African-American man, and he was paid to come out of Mesa and drive around the countryside in the farms and pick up the African-American children and transport us into Booker T. Washington Elementary School. That was an all-black elementary school in Mesa. That went on until I was in the 4th grade, and I'm not sure what happened, but we were not allowed to go back to Mesa. So Chandler then accepted us as students, but there were 4 freestanding buildings out in a place called Goodyear. It's called Ocotillo now. And so we were bused out of the Chandler area, Goodyear, and those 4 freestanding buildings is where the white children went that lived on farms out in that area. We would be bused, out of the Chandler area out to those schools. We'd get off the bus, the white students would get on the same bus, and be bused back into Chandler to attend the schools inside of Chandler. And that went on until I was graduated out of the 8th grade, and then there was no high school for us. But the school district hired 2 teachers, both females, and they taught a number of classes inside the same classroom. One of the interesting things is that I lived at 24 East Saragossa, And diagonal across the street, there was a Wynn School. And the Mexican children went there. I suppose white children too that lived across the street. But although I lived across the street, we couldn't go to that school. For high school, there were 4 of us. My sister, Joella Foley, she became a Foley when she married Zora, and my best friend Robert Turner and his sister, Artie Mae Turner. She was younger than Robert, and I was older than my sister Joella. Since there was no high school for us, again, the Chandler School District, they had a special designed group of tickets, and we were transported by Sun Valley bus lines at that time, and we had 2 weeks supply of tickets, so they would haul us from Chandler into Phoenix School District, and we attended the George Washington Carver High School. It was all black high school. I did that my freshman and sophomore year, and my mom and I think Mr. Scott Payne, Charles' dad, somehow they were able to talk with the governor, but we were allowed to go to high school in Chandler. Chandler either had to build a high school for 4 students or integrated. So in 1949, in my junior year, we were allowed to go to high school in Chandler. I went to Chandler High School, and in 1951, Robert Turner and I were the first African-American students to graduate from the Chandler High School. And I'm the last one of the 4 that's still alive.
You paved the way for all the black students that have ever gone through Chandler High.
When you put 4 African-American children on a campus with white and Mexican children, we were almost invisible.
Tell me a little bit more about being invisible during that time.
Off the school grounds is as if we didn't exist. Everything was completely segregated. Movie theaters, restaurants. We were served food out the back door of the restaurant. If you want a hamburger, you go around to the back of the restaurant. At some moment, they'd fix it and hand it to us out the back doors. Being invisible meant that you were not recognized by anyone of another race.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that part of it, because it's very important. Yes, you were the first that graduated and integrated, but how did that feel? Did you feel welcome? You said there weren't any challenges or problems, but at the same time, you were invisible. But I do want to hear about the community here in Chandler on Saragossa Street that you were a part of.
Well, it was a close-knit community. There were 3 African-American families in Chandler that I can remember. The last name was Payne. Then the Woods family, the Turner family, my family, the Arbuckles. The city council agreed unanimously to name a park after my mother. And so when they got it completed, sure enough, they dedicated it. My wife and I would go by, walk over and read the kiosk there with our family history on it, brief history. So my mom is there, and a picture of her and myself, and my brothers and my sisters.
Tell me about the path to becoming a reverend and what the church that is only a street or 2 away from here, what it meant for the community.
In 1960, I visited Pentecost Church of Jesus Christ. Before then, I didn't attend church really much of anywhere, but the church that I went to mostly growing up was, you're sitting in it,
Right here, Mount Olive.
Mount Olive Baptist Church. It was over on Saragossa. I went to the church because that's where the girls were. And my wife and the bunch. And so we would hang out around Mount Olive Baptist Church. I was 20 when we got married, and she was almost 19, not quite. This year in May, if she had lived, we would have been married 69 years.
Oh, wow.
About 3 years after I was married, I went to church one Saturday night. There was a young man in the Air Force. At some point in the service, he started prophesying. I didn't know what that was all about. And finally he said, "There's a man in the building the Lord is calling." Never called a name. I got this strange feeling, and I knew at that point that I was who he was talking about. I was a man that he was speaking of. He never called my name. I accepted the call to the ministry. I was 28, been preaching ever since. I'm in charge of the church here in Chandler, and have been for a number of years. I've been with my church since 1960, so that's 60 plus years.
Thank you so much for your sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you.